High in the mountains of Ethiopia, beyond the reach of modern cities and hidden behind walls carved into ancient stone, there are monasteries where time seems to stand still. The air is heavy with incense. Candlelight flickers across faded icons. And deep within sacred chambers, monks dressed in white robes chant prayers in Ge'ez, a language older than most nations on earth. But these monasteries are not famous for what they reveal. They are famous for what they protect. For centuries, Ethiopia preserved ancient scriptures the rest of the Christian world left behind. While kingdoms rose and fell, while empires debated doctrine and councils decided which books belonged in the Bible, Ethiopian scribes continued copying texts that many believed had vanished forever. Among them was one mysterious book. A book filled with fallen angels, cosmic judgment, heavenly secrets, and terrifying revelations. A book called Book of Enoch. Inside its pages is a version of history unlike anything found in most modern Bibles. A story not just about humanity's fall, but about angels who descended from heaven, crossed forbidden boundaries, and changed the course of the world forever. These beings were called the Watchers. And among them was one name feared above all others: Azazel. Not a devil with horns and fire, but a celestial being accused of teaching humanity the art of war, weapons, seduction, sorcery, and forbidden knowledge. According to ancient tradition, the corruption of the earth did not begin with mankind alone. It began when heavenly beings interfered with creation itself. And Ethiopia never forgot. In the caves and monasteries of this ancient land, these stories survived invasions, isolation, and centuries of suppression. Not as myths, but as sacred memory. But why were these texts removed from most Western Bibles? Why did early Christians read Enoch, only for it to later disappear from the biblical canon? And what exactly did these ancient writers believe happened before the flood of Noah? Tonight, we journey into one of the most mysterious books ever written. A story of angels and giants, of heaven and judgment, of forbidden knowledge, and of a warning that some believe still echoes into our modern world. Because the deeper we go into the forgotten scriptures of Ethiopia, the stranger the story becomes. Long before Christianity spread across Europe, it had already taken root in Africa. In the ancient kingdom of Aksum, one of the great civilizations of the ancient world, Christianity flourished centuries before many Western nations even existed. Kingdom of Aksum. According to tradition, the Ethiopian royal line traced its ancestry to King Solomon and the Queen of Sheba, linking Ethiopia's identity directly to the biblical world itself. Whether symbolic or historical, that connection shaped Ethiopia's spiritual identity forever. While much of Europe passed through centuries of war and religious upheaval, Ethiopia developed its own ancient Christian tradition, one largely isolated from Rome and the later structures of Western Christianity. That isolation would become incredibly important, because Ethiopia preserved something the rest of the world slowly lost. Ancient books. Not just fragments or legends, but entire scriptures copied by generations of monks who believed these writings carried sacred truth. The Ethiopian biblical canon eventually grew larger than most Christian Bibles used today, containing texts many Western churches would later classify as apocryphal or non-canonical. Among them were Book of Enoch, Book of Jubilees, Ascension of Isaiah. These books survived largely because Ethiopian monks continued translating and preserving them in Ge'ez for centuries. And hidden inside these writings was a dramatically different picture of the spiritual world. In many Western traditions, evil is simplified into a single figure, Satan. But the Ethiopian texts preserved older and more complex traditions. They spoke of heavenly beings called the Watchers, angels sent to observe humanity, angels who eventually rebelled. The story appears most clearly in the Book of Enoch, where 200 Watchers descend upon Mount Hermon under the leadership of a figure named Semjaza. There, according to the text, they swear an oath together. An oath that would change the world forever. Because these beings did more than rebel. They taught humanity forbidden knowledge, weapon making, sorcery, astrology, enchantments, the manipulation of nature itself. And among all these fallen beings, one name became especially feared: Azazel. In Enochic tradition, Azazel is blamed for spreading corruption across the earth by teaching mankind violence and destructive knowledge. The text describes him not as a symbolic force, but as an active participant in humanity's downfall. This ancient worldview painted evil differently than many modern audiences expect. Not merely as temptation, but as corruption transmitted through knowledge. That idea would shape the rest of the Enochic story. Because according to these writings, the rebellion of the Watchers did not stop with forbidden teachings. It led to the birth of something monstrous, the Nephilim. And according to ancient tradition, their existence pushed the world toward catastrophe. The flood was coming. Before the flood, before the rise of kingdoms, before humanity filled the earth with violence, the ancient texts speak of a moment when heaven itself crossed a forbidden boundary. According to the Book of Enoch, there existed a group of celestial beings known as the Watchers. They were not demons. Not originally. They were angels. Holy beings appointed to observe the world and watch over humanity. Their purpose was simple: to witness creation, not interfere with it. But something changed. The Book of Enoch tells us that as humanity multiplied across the earth, the Watchers became captivated by human women. What began as curiosity soon became desire. And desire became rebellion. The leader of this celestial uprising was a powerful watcher named Simjaza, sometimes called Shemaiah in different translations. According to the text, he feared divine judgment for what they were about to do. But the others agreed to bind themselves together with an oath so none could turn back. And so, on the summit of Mount Hermon, 200 watchers made their decision. They would descend to earth. They would take human wives. And they would reveal heavenly secrets never meant for mankind. It was not simply disobedience. It was a violation of cosmic order itself. The boundary between heaven and earth had been broken. The ancient text describes the event with terrifying simplicity. And the angels, the children of heaven, saw and lusted after the daughters of men. From that moment forward, the world began to change. The Watchers no longer remained distant observers. They became teachers, rulers, corruptors. And according to Enochic tradition, humanity embraced the knowledge they brought. One angel taught enchantments and sorcery. Another revealed astrology and the movement of the stars. Others taught warfare, metalworking, cosmetics, seduction, and the manipulation of nature itself. But among all the fallen Watchers, one name stood above the rest: Azazel. Azazel. Enoch accuses Azazel of teaching humanity how to forge weapons of war. Swords, knives, shields, armor. The tools of destruction. The text also claims he taught mankind vanity and corruption, introducing practices associated with pride, greed, and seduction. To the ancient writers, this knowledge was not neutral. It was dangerous, because humanity had received power without wisdom, and the consequences would soon become catastrophic. The earth, according to Enoch, grew violent, corrupted, filled with bloodshed. But the Watchers' greatest transgression was still to come, because their union with human women produced children unlike anything the world had ever seen. The Nephilim, giants, hybrid beings described as powerful, violent, and insatiable. The Book of Enoch portrays them as devourers who consumed everything around them: animals, resources, eventually even humanity itself. Whether taken literally, symbolically, or somewhere in between, the message of the text is clear. Creation itself had become corrupted. The rebellion of the Watchers had unleashed chaos upon the earth. And heaven could no longer remain silent. Because according to the ancient story, divine judgment was already approaching. The flood was not merely punishment. It was a reset. A cleansing of a world that had spiraled beyond control. And before judgment arrived, one man would be chosen to witness the truth behind it all. His name was Enoch. For most people, the Bible feels fixed, complete, untouchable. A single sacred book that has always existed exactly as we know it today. But history tells a far more complicated story. In the early centuries of Christianity, believers across different regions used different collections of sacred texts. Some churches read books that others rejected. Some communities preserved writings that later disappeared entirely from the Western world. And among the most mysterious of these lost writings was the Book of Enoch. Today, many Christians have never even heard of it. Yet in the ancient world, Enoch was deeply respected. Fragments of the text were discovered among the famous Dead Sea Scrolls, proving that Jewish communities were reading it centuries before the birth of Christ. Even more surprising, the New Testament itself appears to reference it. In the Epistle of Jude, a prophecy attributed to Enoch is quoted almost directly, suggesting that early Christians were familiar with the text and considered it important. So what happened? Why did a book once known by early believers disappear from most Bibles? The answer lies in centuries of theological debate. As Christianity expanded across the Roman world, church leaders began deciding which books would become part of official scripture. Some texts were embraced universally. Others became controversial. The Book of Enoch was one of them. Its descriptions were too unusual, too cosmic, too dangerous for some religious authorities. It spoke openly about angels descending to earth, heavenly beings teaching forbidden knowledge, and giant hybrid offspring corrupting humanity before the flood. It described multiple layers of heaven, prisons for fallen angels, and visions of divine judgment unlike anything found in most traditional scripture. For many church leaders, these ideas raised difficult questions. Were these stories literal, symbolic, inspired, or dangerous? Over time, most branches of Christianity stopped including Enoch in their official canon. But Ethiopia did not. Far from the political and theological centers of Europe, the Ethiopian Orthodox Tewahedo Church continued preserving Enoch as sacred scripture. And Enoch was not alone. Other ancient writings also survived in Ethiopia. Book of Jubilees, Ascension of Isaiah, Shepherd of Hermas. Together, these texts preserved an older worldview. A universe alive with angels, cosmic warfare, hidden knowledge, divine judgment, and spiritual rebellion. To modern readers, these writings can feel shocking. But to ancient believers, the supernatural world was not distant. It was everywhere. The heavens were populated with beings both holy and fallen. History itself was seen as part of a cosmic conflict unfolding between divine order and corruption. And nowhere is that conflict more terrifying than in the story of the Watchers. Because according to Enoch, evil did not begin in hell. It began in heaven. Before the flood. Before Noah. Before recorded civilization. There was a rebellion. Not of men, but of angels. And their descent would change humanity forever. Among all the names recorded in the ancient stories of the Watchers, one stands apart in fear and infamy. Azazel. Azazel. In the traditions preserved within the Book of Enoch, Azazel is not portrayed as a horned ruler of hell, nor as the red-skinned devil of medieval art. He is something far more unsettling. A teacher. A corrupter. A being who gave humanity knowledge it was never meant to possess. According to Enoch, Azazel descended with the other Watchers, but his influence became uniquely destructive. While some angels revealed the secrets of the heavens, Azazel taught mankind how to wage war. The ancient text accuses him of revealing the crafting of swords, knives, shields, and armor. For the writers of Enoch, this was not progress. It was the beginning of organized violence. Before Azazel, humanity survived. After Azazel, humanity conquered. And conquest always demanded blood. But warfare was only part of his legacy. The text also claims Azazel introduced humanity to vanity and seduction. He revealed cosmetics, jewelry, and the beautification of the body. To modern ears, this may sound harmless, but ancient writers viewed these practices symbolically. To them, external beauty could become a mask for spiritual corruption. Pride, greed, desire, power. The forbidden knowledge of the Watchers was dangerous because it amplified human weakness. And according to Enoch, the earth quickly descended into chaos. Violence spread across nations. Bloodshed multiplied. Humanity became consumed by domination and excess. The text places direct blame on Azazel for the corruption of the world. One passage declares, "The whole earth has been corrupted through the works that were taught by Azazel." That statement reveals something important about ancient Enochic belief. Evil was not viewed merely as temptation. It was contamination. A corruption that spread through knowledge, influence, and rebellion against divine order. In this worldview, the fallen Watchers did not simply encourage sin. They altered civilization itself. And perhaps that is why these stories still fascinate people today. Because even in the modern world, humanity continues wrestling with the same question. What happens when knowledge advances faster than wisdom? The ancient writers feared a world where power existed without morality. Where humanity gained the ability to destroy before learning restraint. To them, Azazel represented that danger. Not science itself. Not learning itself. But knowledge divorced from responsibility. And according to the story, heaven finally intervened. The cries of humanity rose upward. The earth, filled with violence and suffering, called out for judgment. Then the archangels appeared. Michael, Gabriel, Raphael, Uriel. According to Enoch, God commanded them to act. Azazel would not escape judgment. The text says he was bound in darkness, cast into the wilderness, and imprisoned until the final judgment. The Watchers who descended to earth would also face punishment for violating the boundaries of creation. But their influence would remain behind. Their teachings, their corruption, their legacy. And the greatest evidence of that legacy still walked the earth. The Nephilim, the giant offspring of the Watchers. And as their violence spread across the world, one truth became unavoidable. The earth could not continue like this. The flood was coming. By the time the Watchers had fully spread their influence across the earth, creation itself was beginning to unravel. According to the Book of Enoch, the union between the fallen watchers and human women produced beings unlike anything the world had ever seen. The Nephilim. Gigantic offspring born from a forbidden crossing between heaven and earth. In later traditions they would become legends. Giants, titans, warriors of terrifying strength. But in Enochic literature, the Nephilim are not heroic figures. They are portrayed as a sign that the natural order of creation had been corrupted. The text describes them as beings of enormous hunger and violence. At first, they consumed the resources of humanity, then the animals, and eventually, according to the ancient account, they turned against mankind itself. The earth descended into chaos. Bloodshed spread from nation to nation. Violence became normal. The ancient writers describe a world overwhelmed by fear, corruption, and destruction. Whether understood literally, symbolically, or spiritually, the message is unmistakable. Human civilization had become infected by something unnatural. The Watchers had not simply taught forbidden knowledge. They had changed the structure of the world itself. And the Nephilim became living evidence of that corruption. This idea appears not only in Enoch, but echoes briefly in the biblical Book of Genesis. There were giants in the earth in those days. Book of Genesis. In Genesis, the reference is short and mysterious. But Enoch expands the story dramatically, describing an age when the boundaries between the divine and human worlds collapsed. And according to these traditions, the consequences were catastrophic. The violence of the Nephilim cried out to heaven. Creation itself was suffering. Then, according to Enoch, the archangels brought humanity's condition before God. The earth had become corrupted beyond repair. Judgment was inevitable. This is where the ancient flood story takes on a darker meaning than many people realize. In most modern retellings, the flood is presented simply as punishment for human wickedness. But in Enochic tradition, the flood also becomes an act of cosmic cleansing, a resetting of creation itself, not merely to punish humanity, but to purge the corruption unleashed by the Watchers and their offspring. The Nephilim would not survive. The Watchers would be imprisoned, and the ancient world would be washed away beneath the waters. But before judgment came, one man was chosen to receive revelation. A man described as righteous in a corrupted generation. A man who would witness the secrets of heaven itself. Enoch. Unlike the Watchers, Enoch did not descend from heaven. He was invited upward, chosen to see what no human being was meant to see. And according to ancient tradition, what he witnessed beyond the heavens would change the understanding of the universe forever. Among all the figures of the ancient world, Enoch stands apart as one of the most mysterious. He was not a king, not a warrior, not a ruler of nations. And yet, according to ancient tradition, he was chosen for something no other human had experienced. Heaven opened for him. The Book of Enoch describes Enoch not merely as a prophet, but as a witness to the hidden structure of reality itself. While the world below descended into violence and corruption, Enoch was taken upward beyond the boundaries of ordinary human understanding. The text says he was carried by angels through the heavens, not in death, but while still alive. What follows is one of the most astonishing visionary journeys in ancient religious literature. Enoch passes through realms of fire, crystal chambers, rivers of light, and gates guarded by celestial beings. He sees the storehouses of the winds, the pathways of the stars, the chambers where snow, rain, and thunder are kept. To the ancient mind, this was not mythology. It was a revelation of cosmic order, a universe governed by divine law and precision. Enoch learns that the heavens move according to appointed times and boundaries established by God. Nothing is random. Every star has a path. Every season has a purpose. Every action carries consequence. But beyond the beauty of the heavens, Enoch is also shown something terrifying: judgment. The angels guiding him reveal prisons hidden in darkness beneath the earth, places prepared for the fallen Watchers who corrupted humanity. According to the text, these rebellious beings remain bound, awaiting final judgment. Enoch hears their cries. He witnesses their punishment. And he understands that no power, earthly or heavenly, escapes accountability. The journey continues deeper into the mysteries of existence. Enoch is shown the dwelling places of the dead, separate regions where souls await judgment, the righteous resting in peace, the wicked awaiting justice. The imagery is vivid, mysterious, and deeply symbolic. Ancient readers believed Enoch had glimpsed the invisible architecture of the spiritual world. But the greatest moment of the journey still lies ahead. Enoch is brought before the throne of God. The text struggles to describe what he sees: a throne surrounded by fire, brilliance brighter than the sun, countless angels standing in silence, a glory too overwhelming for human language. Even the heavenly beings tremble before it. And there, in the presence of divine majesty, Enoch receives a mission. He is commanded to record everything he has seen: the corruption of the watchers, the coming judgment, the order of the heavens, the fate of humanity. His writings are meant not only for his own generation, but for distant ages still to come. That idea gives the Book of Enoch its haunting power. It presents itself not simply as history, but as a warning. A message preserved for a future world struggling with corruption, violence, pride, and forbidden power. And perhaps most remarkable of all, Enoch's visions contain mysterious references to a coming righteous figure, a chosen one, a heavenly judge, a son of man who will one day bring justice to the earth. Centuries later, early Christians would see echoes of these passages in the life and teachings of Jesus Christ, which is one reason the Book of Enoch became so influential among early believers. But influence did not guarantee acceptance. As centuries passed, many religious authorities grew uncomfortable with Enoch's visions. The book was considered too strange, too dangerous, too difficult to control. And slowly, across much of the world, it began to disappear. Everywhere, except Ethiopia. For centuries, the Book of Enoch circulated among ancient Jewish communities and early Christians. Its visions shaped religious imagination. Its warnings echoed through sermons. Its imagery influenced generations of believers trying to understand heaven, judgment, angels, and the end of the world. And yet today most people have never read it. Some have never even heard its name. So how does a book once respected by early believers nearly vanish from the Western Christian world? The answer lies in one of the most complicated chapters in religious history. As Christianity spread throughout the Roman Empire, church leaders faced a difficult challenge. Which writings truly belonged in Scripture? Dozens of texts circulated among Christian communities. Some were accepted widely. Others were debated fiercely. Over time, councils and theologians worked to establish what would eventually become the biblical canon recognized by most churches today. During this process, certain books gradually fell outside mainstream acceptance. Enoch became one of them. Not necessarily because everyone believed it was false, but because it raised difficult theological questions. Its descriptions of angels descending to earth were unsettling. Its cosmic visions were extreme. Its stories of heavenly secrets, imprisoned watchers, and giant offspring challenged simpler interpretations of evil and human history. Some religious leaders worried the book encouraged speculation about angels and hidden knowledge. Others questioned whether ordinary believers would misunderstand its symbolism. And so, over centuries, the Book of Enoch slowly disappeared from most Western traditions. But it was never completely lost. In Ethiopia, the book survived. Preserved by the Ethiopian Orthodox Tewahedo Church, copied by monks generation after generation, translated into Guizi, and protected within ancient monasteries long after much of the world forgot it existed. That preservation would become incredibly important centuries later. Because when modern scholars rediscovered ancient manuscripts of Enoch, they realized something astonishing. The book was older than many had assumed. Fragments discovered among the Dead Sea Scrolls proved that Enochic traditions existed long before the rise of Christianity. Suddenly, this mysterious text was no longer dismissed as a medieval invention. It was ancient. Very ancient, and its influence appeared everywhere. The New Testament book of Jude quotes Enoch directly. The imagery of divine judgment found in Revelation echoes Enochic themes. Early Christian writers were clearly familiar with its ideas. In many ways, Enoch stood at the crossroads between ancient Judaism and early Christianity. But perhaps the most fascinating question is this: why does the book still resonate today? Maybe because its themes feel strangely modern. A world corrupted by power. Knowledge used without wisdom. Violence spreading across nations. Humanity crossing moral boundaries it barely understands. The Book of Enoch presents these dangers not merely as political problems, but as spiritual ones. It warns that corruption begins when power becomes separated from righteousness. When pride replaces humility. When humanity seeks control without responsibility. And perhaps that is why the book continues to survive. Not because of conspiracy. Not because of secret societies, but because every generation eventually confronts the same fears. Can knowledge destroy us? Can civilization lose its moral foundation? And what happens when humanity forgets the difference between wisdom and power? The ancient writers of Enoch believed they already knew the answer. And according to them, the consequences were catastrophic. But before the story ends, one final question remains. Did the Watchers truly disappear? Or did their influence simply evolve with the world around us? Thousands of years have passed since the stories recorded in the Book of Enoch were first written. Empires have risen and collapsed. Religions have spread across continents. Civilizations have transformed the world in ways the ancient writers could never have imagined. And yet, the warnings of Enoch still feel strangely familiar. Because at its core, the story of the Watchers was never just about angels. It was about corruption. About what happens when power grows faster than wisdom. About what happens when knowledge is used without moral restraint. The ancient writers believed humanity's greatest danger was not ignorance. It was the misuse of what we learn. That fear echoes powerfully in the modern world. Today, humanity possesses extraordinary abilities. We can reshape nature, manipulate genetics, create weapons capable of destroying entire cities, build systems powerful enough to influence billions of lives. Knowledge has expanded beyond anything ancient civilizations could imagine. But wisdom has not always grown alongside it. And that is what makes the story of the Watchers feel so haunting. In Enochic tradition, the fallen angels did not corrupt humanity through brute force alone. They corrupted humanity by offering power without spiritual responsibility. The danger was never knowledge itself. The danger was knowledge disconnected from truth, humility, and restraint. That theme continues to resonate because every generation faces the same temptation: to believe that power alone can save us. The Book of Enoch challenges that belief. It warns that civilizations can become consumed by violence, pride, greed, and domination when moral boundaries collapse. And whether one interprets the Watchers literally, symbolically, or spiritually, their story continues to function as a warning about human nature itself. A warning about arrogance, about obsession with control, about forgetting the sacred limits that hold civilization together. This is one reason the Book of Enoch still fascinates people across the world today. Not because it provides easy answers, but because it asks unsettling questions. Questions that remain unresolved. What happens when humanity pursues advancement without wisdom? Can civilization survive if morality collapses beneath technological power? And are we repeating patterns ancient writers believed had already destroyed the world once before? In Ethiopia, these stories were never completely forgotten. Within ancient monasteries, the writings of Enoch continued to be preserved while much of the world moved on. Not as fantasy, not as entertainment, but as sacred warning. A reminder that history is not only political or material, but spiritual. And perhaps that is why the Book of Enoch continues to endure after thousands of years. Because beneath its stories of angels, giants, and heavenly visions lies something deeply human. The fear that civilization can lose itself. And the hope that truth, justice, and righteousness still matter in the end. The ancient writers believed the universe was not empty. That every action carried consequence. That corruption would eventually face judgment. And that no darkness lasts forever. Whether one sees Enoch as prophecy, mythology, symbolism, or sacred history, its message continues to echo across generations. Power without wisdom leads to ruin. Pride leads to collapse. And humanity ignores moral boundaries at its own peril. The Watchers may belong to the ancient past, but their shadow still lingers over the modern world. And perhaps that is why the story refuses to die. For thousands of years, the story of Book of Enoch survived in silence. Preserved in ancient Ethiopian monasteries, copied by generations of monks, protected while empires rose and disappeared. Some dismissed it as myth, others feared it, and many simply forgot it existed. But the questions it raises never truly vanished. What if humanity has crossed dangerous boundaries before? What if ancient civilizations wrestled with the same temptations we face today? Power without wisdom, knowledge without morality, progress without restraint. Whether you believe the Watchers were literal beings, symbolic warnings, or spiritual allegories, one thing is undeniable. The Book of Enoch continues to challenge the way we think about history, corruption, judgment, and the unseen world. Its message still echoes across centuries. That actions have consequences. That civilizations can fall. And that truth is not always preserved by the powerful. Sometimes, it survives in forgotten places, waiting to be rediscovered. And perhaps that is why Ethiopia's ancient scriptures continue to fascinate the world today. Because hidden within those ancient pages is not just a story about angels and giants, but a warning about humanity itself. If this journey into the forgotten world of Enoch opened your eyes, make sure to subscribe for more hidden histories, ancient mysteries, and lost traditions the world almost forgot. And let me know in the comments, do you believe the Watchers were real? Or were they symbolic warnings about the dangers of human ambition? Share this video with someone fascinated by ancient history, forbidden texts, and biblical mysteries. Because the deeper we search the past, the stranger the story becomes, and some ancient secrets may still be waiting to be uncovered.